Hi, I'm William, and today I'm going to be talking about the Lucky Dragon Number 5 incident. This is a nuclear disaster that occurred in 1954 in Japan. It is something that is sort of in the modern context and our modern understanding of nuclear disasters and nuclear technology has really been forgotten, but at the time it was very culturally relevant and very significant in the proliferation of nuclear technology. Um, so before getting into it, there's a couple of things I want to say. First off, I want to give a thank you to my professor, Dr. Hansen. Um, I learned a lot of this in his class and the assigned readings. This is a form of note taking. I am a second year undergraduate in Japanese studies. I'm not an expert, so if you're stumbling on this video, this is really just a summary of my notes. It is not like an authoritative piece. So I'm going to link some of the reading material that I've covered in the description. If this is something that interests you, I highly encourage you to look at that. Um, yeah, I think that's it. Oh, this is unscripted as well. This is really just a test of my workflow. I have a couple of scripted videos that I want to do in the future. So this is a test. So again, keep that in mind. This is my first video, so be gentle. And yeah, we'll get right into it. So the first thing we need to talk about is the background regarding the Lucky Dragon Number 5 incident. It can be said that Japan has been a very unlucky country when it comes to nuclear technology and its effects, both within and without its borders. There have been three major incidents involving nuclear technology on or against Japan. Two of them are highly well known in the international consciousness. The first were the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945. These are very culturally relevant because they were the first and to this day only usage of nuclear arms in a offensive capacity and also against a civilian population. Whether or not their usage was justified is not within the scope of this video. The second incident that is well known was the disaster at the TEPCO facility of Fukushima Daiichi following the Tohoku earthquake on 3/11. This is well known because it's sort of the most recent large nuclear disaster in the world, and the prominence of Japan as a international power, if that's the right word, definitely puts it into the light. However, the third incident, one that occurred in 1954, is sort of not really thought about at all, and that is what we're talking about today, the Lucky Dragon Number 5 incident. Now, the historical context around what is about to happen that you should know are two things. One is that information regarding atomic weaponry and the consequences, crucially, the consequences of atomic weaponry on those affected by it, were not really well known at this time, even in a country like Japan. This was because of heavy occupation censorship on discussion of the atomic bombings by the US occupation under Douglas MacArthur. They wanted the Japanese people to stay on side and not protest against the occupation. Therefore, by showing what could be construed as a tragedy, as an atrocity committed by the US on civilian Japanese was not acceptable. Up to 1949, the restrictions were you basically couldn't talk about it at all. Pictures were not able to be shared. At 1949, the restrictions began to be relaxed, but they were still fairly heavy. The other thing that we need to know is that about 6 months prior to March 1954, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics had successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. This was unacceptable to the United States. They must have a hydrogen bomb of their own. And so the Operation Castle, was sort of steamrolled, and testing was to begin in March, with the first detonation being the Operation Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb. The Lucky Dragon number 5 was a wooden fishing vessel crewed entirely by Japanese nationals, and it was chasing a school of tuna near a small atoll in the Pacific Ocean called the Bikini Atoll on the 1st of March 1954. At 6:45 a.m., they were awoken to a bright flash of light that lasted some minutes to the west of them. Now, this light, after it had subsided, there started to be a rain-like substance of white, sleet-like objects that came. They were in a zone that was declared like a no-entry zone, but the Japanese government hadn't said why ships could not enter this zone. It was very small, and the fishermen didn't really see a reason why. They were just popping in to get some tuna. Now, the source for this is Oishi Matashichi's memoirs, The Day the Sun Rose in the West. After the sleet and after the light, the crew began to get sick, to the point that some of their hair was falling out a couple of days after. They're eventually able to dock back in Japan on the March 14th. They are immediately admitted to hospital, and their symptoms are concerning. So eventually, the University of Tokyo's medical school, experts from there, diagnosed them with acute radiation sickness. So, it's important to know that the Japanese government at this time did know of the hydrogen bomb tests and deliberately did not inform the Japanese public. This was because they were in negotiations with the US. This was 1954, so only 2 years after the Treaty of San Francisco was signed and the war officially ended and the occupation lifted. If I'm not mistaken, it was over things regarding actually fishing, tuna rights and such. So they didn't really want to annoy the US. So negotiations due to that led the Japanese to effectively cover for the US. And when this all came to light, the Japanese government tried to sort of discreetly pay compensation. Each member affected from the Lucky Dragon number 5 was given the equivalent of 1,500 US dollars. Now, one of the crew members, Kuboyama, died because of radiation sickness. His family was given $16,000. But this led to wide-scale protests. It was a huge hit to popular opinion on atomic technology. At this time, the US was heavily promoting civilian nuclear technology to all of its allies. You have to remember that when, after the war, the US was primarily concerned with Japan's pacification. But by this point, the Cold War had been in swing for 5 years. The USSR had nuclear weapons, and as I said before, they had tested hydrogen weapons before the US. So with the Korean War was now finished at this point. It ended in 1953. They were far more concerned, the US was far more concerned with Japan being a strong Pacific ally. And exporting nuclear technology for civilian infrastructure was something the US really wanted to do. They were world pioneers of nuclear technology. And popular opinion turned against it. They were able to keep it somewhat under wraps after the atomic bombings because of censorship, because they didn't allow depictions to be shown. They didn't even allow memorials and memorial services for victims of the atomic bombings. But after the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident, there wasn't this type of censorship. People were annoyed at the US, and they were especially annoyed at Japan for allowing this to happen. At the start of this video, I said that there were important and culturally profound consequences due to the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. So to get into those, First, it became like the first real flashpoint around atomic technology for civilian usage. Large protests and some of the first anti-nuclear demonstrations in the world. But there is something that culturally today you could say is maybe more relevant, a sort of icon of Japanese popular culture that would directly not exist if it wasn't for the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. And that is, and I'm being honest here, Godzilla. So, Godzilla is a film that showcases a beast being awoken by hydrogen bomb testing. Its first victims, when it's going through the ocean to Japan, are fishermen, and the Japanese government tries to conceal the existence of Godzilla. This film was released in late 1954, only about 6 or 7 months after the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. Like the first film, not speaking of the later Godzilla franchise, it became its own popular thing, but the first film was a direct critique of atomic weapons of mass destruction. You have the character of Professor Serizawa, who comes up with a weapon that can kill Godzilla, but he refuses to use it in fear of awakening something worse. In hindsight, we can see this as like a prelude to maybe thermonuclear technology. Now, as a side note, the studio that created it, Toho Studios, were able to make the film so fast because in the 1940s they were making propaganda films for the Japanese government. So they already had broken cityscapes, like sets of broken cityscapes, from their films on things like Pearl Harbor and the bombing of Manila by the Japanese forces. So all of this led to the United States Intelligence Agency, Information Agency maybe, the USIA, who were the lead sort of propaganda agency of the US. I remember them being described as sort of a tower of Babel of nonsense, sort of to drown out USSR propaganda. To extensively rehabilitate the image of the atom, especially in Japan. It was a period of it was in this period of heavy pro-atom propaganda that the work Tetsuan Atomu, or in English Astro Boy, was written, and it's a far more positive look at nuclear technology. The main character sort of exists because of nuclear technology. So while Astro Boy is not directly linked. It is not like Godzilla. It is not about the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. It was because the US was so heavily promoting positive atomic or like positive opinions on atomic technology through expos, through pop artists like the song Atom Bomb Baby, saw a lot of playtime in Japan. It was in this environment that Astro Boy was written. So I'm sure Tezuka Osamu would have made a piece of work in this time, maybe regardless, but would it have been about nuclear technology? Would it have been about Astro Boy? That we don't know. So to conclude, what can we learn from the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident? What was its significance? Well, the Lucky Dragon incident was the first real synthesis of global level nuclear protest throughout the 50s and 60s. When people protested nuclear technology, before incidents like Chernobyl, it was the Lucky Dragon that was at the forefront of people's minds. There were English language works about the Castle Bravo bombing and about the consequences. It did reach world traction. Now, it also informed culturally significant works. Godzilla and all of its subsequent works would not have existed without the press that came from these fishermen getting sick and one even dying. And it indirectly set the stage for the environment that Tezuka Osamu would write Astro Boy in, and other creative works from other authors as well in Japan at this time, because of the US's like overcompensation and promotion of nuclear technology. Now, it is overshadowed by other nuclear disasters, both inside and outside of Japan. You know, we've already discussed the atomic bombings and 3/11. You know, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami that led to the Fukushima Daiichi disaster. But you know, there were other things and other sort of worse disasters as well outside of Japan. You know, Chernobyl, 3 Mile Island, just to name two. But yeah, like as I said before, make no mistake, through the 50s and 60s, the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident was near the forefront of anyone's mind when nuclear technology was discussed, and the United States spent millions to try and downplay it, and it still took a huge credibility hit because of it. So that's my video on the Lucky Dragon number 5 incident. I've said it so much, it's starting to sound a bit weird. I hope you liked it. Please send me any feedback. You know, was the audio quality okay? Am I too quiet, too loud? Can you hear the things in the background? You know, let me know. But yeah, hope you liked it. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.